You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is April 27th, 2025, and this is another episode of Lighthearted Light. Today we'll have something old and something new. A couple of our recent episodes have been about Rhode Island lighthouses, and we're heading back to the Ocean State today. First, we'll hear a new interview about the newly restored Conimicut Light near Warwick, Rhode Island, and then we'll listen to an edited version of an interview from 2019 about Sakonnet Light near Little Compton. Both of them are cast iron caisson lights, the kind that many people know as sparkplug lights. We will start with Conimicut Light. Conimicut Lighthouse was built in the northern part of Narragansett Bay at the mouth of the Providence River in 1883. Conimicut was one of the last lighthouses in the nation to be converted to electricity. It was automated and destaffed in 1963. In 2004, the lighthouse was transferred to the city of Warwick, Rhode Island, under the guidelines of the National Historic Lighthouse Preservation Act. It took a little while for preservation efforts to get going, but last year there was a major restoration of the exterior of the lighthouse. The work was performed by Keith Lescarbeau of Abcore Restoration, and one of the prime movers of the project was Warwick Mayor Frank Picozzi. I had a chance recently to speak with Mayor Picozzi. Let's listen to that now. I am speaking today with the mayor of the great city of Warwick, Rhode Island, Mayor Frank Picozzi. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So let me tell you, first of all, I have a little history with Conimicut Lighthouse. First of all, I wrote a book on Rhode Island lighthouses just about 20 years ago, so I researched it quite a bit. I've been all around it in boats. I've been over it in a helicopter. I have not been in it. I hope maybe that could happen someday.
That could happen.
Well, who knows? That'd be fantastic. I would love that. And I've known Fred Mickelson for quite a while, a number of years.
Yeah, he's a really great guy.
He really is. He's been on the podcast, and I love his stories of life in the days when he was at Conimicut Lighthouse. So, and also, by the way, I think the city's owned it for a little more than 20 years now. Is that about right?
Yeah, I don't know exactly, but it's around that.
Yeah. And back then, soon after the city got ownership, I was actually invited down for a meeting with some of the city officials to talk about possibilities for how to get it restored and that kind of thing. Right. So that enters into my history with it as well. So the city has owned it for, I think, a little more than 20 years now, and the some restoration work has happened recently. I'm not finding fault with anyone because I know how difficult it is to restore an offshore lighthouse. Kind of a two-part question here. How did the work that happened recently come about? And I'm wondering about if you've had a personal involvement with that work.
Well, yes. I live right near the Conimicut Point Lighthouse. It's about a mile away, so it means a lot to me. I used to go there when I was a kid, and it's a source of pride for Warwick. Nothing got done for many years, mostly because of politics. We had a Republican mayor. We had a Democratic council. They couldn't see eye to eye on it. Funding's always a problem, but every time someone came up with a possibility, the other side shot it down. So I made it a priority when I became mayor, and coincidentally, they started earmark grants again. So when they came up with the first round, one of the very first things I applied for was the Conimicut Lighthouse. At that time, Jim Langevin was the congressman. He was a U.S. congressman, but he's a Warwick boy. He cares a lot about Warwick, and I called him about the lighthouse, and he thought it was a great idea. And he pushed that through personally. He pushed it through Congress. The congressional earmarks are a lot less money than the Senate earmarks, but this was the kind of thing that, he would champion. So we ended up getting, I think, about $750,000 for it. So not enough to restore the inside, but it certainly did restore the outside. And they did an incredible job. I mean, it looks like the day it was built right now.
Yeah. Well, it looks fantastic in the pictures I've seen. I can't wait to get down there in person. And let me also mention that, again, with the U.S. Lighthouse Society, that's what this podcast is for. And I'm going to be co-leading a Cape Cod trip in September, but we're actually staying in Warwick at the Crowne Plaza Hotel at the beginning and end of the tour.
Right down the street from City Hall. You'll have to come to visit.
Yeah, well, on the first morning of the tour, we're going to go to Conimicut Point Park for the view of the lighthouse. Looking forward to that. So as you said, the exterior's been restored, the interior not yet. So are there any specific plans in place yet for doing the interior?
I have to find more money to do the interior, which is always a problem with municipal government. It's not that bad. It's mostly painting, but to restore it the way it was, the bathrooms and the kitchen and all that, that's going to be a chore. We've been trying to look for a private partnership. This was offered like 20 years ago. A company wanted to turn it into a bed and breakfast or museum or something like that. So we've talked to a couple of people, but they haven't panned out, but we're still searching.
Well, that was actually just a few, I'd say 3 or 4 years ago. A good friend of mine was the one who suggested the B&B, and he owns a lighthouse B&B, and he restored another one in Fall River that has overnight stays.
Yeah.
So, if you want to get back in touch with him, I can certainly help with that. But
Oh yeah, get him in touch with me.
well, who knows? I think it's one of the ways. It's one of the ways you can generate funds for a lighthouse, and it's always great when they can be kind of self-supporting.
Self-supporting and pay for the maintenance too.
Yes, exactly. That's always a big plus. So let me ask you, I know Keith Lascarbo, somebody I've known for a long time,
Yes,
was the
he's
contractor
brilliant.
on the job. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Keith is sensational. He actually, at no charge, went beyond the scope of the work. As you know, there used to be a gutter that surrounded went around the lighthouse, and that gutter fed the cistern, and that was the drinking water for the lighthouse. Well, the gutter wasn't going to be able to be part of this because it was another almost $200,000 to restore it.
Mhm.
So, because of historical building laws, we couldn't put it up, so we had to store it inside. Keith just did it for free.
Yeah.
That's what a great guy is. It just didn't sit well with him that it wasn't going to be restored to 100% what it looked like. So he did it on his own.
Yeah.
He was fantastic. There were no change orders. It was like a ritual of passion in what he did to that lighthouse. He was so proud of it. He did a great job. I mean, a lot of the railings had to be replaced, not all of them. And I defy anyone to go and show me which one is a brand new railing and which one is an old railing, because you can't tell. The portals, the doorways, everything. He just restored it. He did a lot of it in his shop over the winter, the first winter that he worked. It was just incredible. I mean, there were tears in our eyes, and we went out on a fire department's boat, and we just couldn't believe it as we got closer and closer. It looked great from shore, but when you go out there, I mean, because it was a mess. I mean, there was vegetation growing out of the gutters. There was just moss all over the decks. He epoxied them. It just looks like a brand new lighthouse.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember the stuff growing on the roof there.
It was horrible.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've known Keith a long time. He's done some great work on other Rhode Island lighthouses like Plum Beach and Palm Rocks in East Providence, and a bunch of other ones, Dutch Island and Jamestown and so forth.
We're lucky to have him here in Rhode Island. We're very lucky to have him here.
He is the lighthouse contractor in Rhode Island. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
Yeah. It sounds like you've visited the lighthouse yourself, probably on multiple occasions.
As often as I can.
Yeah, yeah. Have you've been inside probably too?
Oh yeah. Every time I go there, I go inside.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's in rough shape inside, but I think Keith kind of cleaned it up as part of this job.
He cleaned it up a lot. He cleaned a lot of it up. And he told me it's actually not as bad because the paint, it's all chips. And he said that makes it easier to take off. He said it wouldn't take a whole lot to do that. We're going to search for some more money to at least paint it and restore it inside. And even if we can't do the kitchen and all that, but just to improve it. But the most important thing was the outside, because the structural integrity is it's there now. It's not going to fall into the sea like I was afraid it was going to.
Yeah, well, those caisson lighthouses are pretty sturdy. Or so-called sparkplug lighthouses, as people sometimes call them. But the most common trouble they have is the caisson itself, the foundation. They tend to, the plates start splitting apart and that type of thing.
No, Keith said that's in very good shape.
That's great.
Yeah, but like I said, I mean, we had, the hatch, the door, whatever, it didn't really close all the way so the weather could get into it. Some of the portals were missing, and the railings were just falling off. It was awful.
So we mentioned Fred Mickelson earlier, who was a Coast Guard keeper there. I believe it was circa 1958 to 61.
Yeah.
Great guy. And he's got such, vivid memories of life there. He gave me some photos some years ago of the interior. He took pictures back then when he
Yep.
was there. Have you seen those pictures?
Yes, I have. And I showed him the old pictures. He was here in my office, and he was saying, that's where my workbench was. That's where I kept my tools. This is where this picture was. He does have vivid memories, and he has great stories about it. I mean, even just taking the rowboat and going ashore and going into the little village there and buying groceries.
Oh, he's got so many great stories. So let me ask you, has there been much local reaction to the lighthouse being restored?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. People love it. I mean, people love it. The people, we get a lot of people who go down and visit Conimicut. There were a lot of complaints before too. It looked terrible. And some people said didn't know how bad it looked until it was restored. We hear from a lot of boaters. And I mean, it's not just Warwick people either. Conimicut shows almost, it's more than a third of the way out into Narragansett Bay. It's iconic for the whole state. I mean, when we applied for the earmark grant, we had to get some support. And I mean, the governor signed on, the Speaker of the House signed on. We had people from all the cities and towns signing on because everyone sees it and everyone wanted to restore it. We had great support for it. No money from them, but a lot of great support.
Yeah. Well, that's not uncommon at all. But lighthouses are so important to communities. Often they're kind of centerpieces for communities and among the more
Right.
historic structures in the communities as well. So, has there been any talk of, or maybe it's already happening that I'm not aware of, but talk of the formation of any kind of like friends group to help support the preservation of the lighthouse?
Not really. No one's come forward yet. This is all very new. It's, the work was just completed less than a year ago.
Right, right. I don't know if that's something that's been discussed or, I just wonder if there might be people in the community who might be interested in that.
They could be. Like I said, they haven't come forward and we haven't put out the call yet because, like I said, it's all relatively new.
Sure,
But
absolutely.
there's a great organization down there, the Conimicut Village Association. They care a lot about the village. They care about the lighthouse. So, we may talk to them in the near future.
Yeah, that sounds good. So there's also another lighthouse in Warwick, of course, the one on Warwick Neck.
Yes.
And do I understand has the city applied for ownership of that through what they call the NHLPA, the National Historic Lighthouse Preservation Act?
We have, in conjunction with the Warwick Neck Improvement Association. That lighthouse means a lot to me too, because I grew up not far from there. The Coast Guard used to man it when I was a boy, and the daughter went to school with me. I was in Warwick Neck Elementary School with her. And at that time, you could just go down there and go fishing. There was no fence, no gates. They used to have a stairway down. There's like a rock cliff there, and it was great fishing there. It's been closed off now, so we want to acquire it and we want to open it to the public, but it'd have to be structured and limited because there's not much parking there.
Yeah.
So we, like I said, we joined forces with the Warwick Neck Improvement Association because we don't want someone to get a hold of it and make it into a business or a bed and breakfast. We want to keep it, public. We want people to be able to go down there and see it.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful place. I've been lucky enough to get on there a couple of times with groups. It's been a while. I don't think the Coast Guard used to have a Coast Guard officer and family living there. I don't think
Right.
there's been anybody there in recent years.
No, the house is, it needs some work. It's not that far gone, but we've talked to a couple of veterans organizations that would be willing to do the maintenance and have an office there. But, we have to get selected first. We haven't heard anything really. We heard something. We just have to give another letter that we still want to do it, but no decisions have been made yet.
Well, it's not a fast process, I can tell you that.
No, government moves slowly.
Let me ask you a final question, okay, for bonus points.
Okay.
You've kind of answered already, but I'll give you another chance if you want to expand on it. But what does the lighthouse mean to the city of Warwick? And part two of that is why should it be preserved?
It's a part of our history. Warwick's, a waterfront town. People take great pride in both of those lighthouses. Conimicut Point is very busy, not just for people from Warwick, people from all over the state coming here. Just seeing that out there, it's a piece of history. They don't need it anymore. They could put a pole with a light up there with technology, but it's just something you want to preserve. Warwick has a lot of history here. We have historic villages, historic homes, historic buildings. We care about history here, and I think if if I let the lighthouse go anymore, there would have been a lynch mob coming to City Hall. It's iconic. It's just if you look at our stationery, the lighthouse is there. The word beacon is based on that lighthouse. It's just part of Warwick, and it's important to preserve it, forever for future generations.
Yeah. Oh, beautifully said. And again, that's true in so many communities that have lighthouses. They are very important to our communities. So if and when the interior is restored, has there been any thought to actually the public having some accessibility there, like tours or something?
Yeah, we've thought about it. It'd be difficult. I mean, it's hard to access that. You wouldn't be able to make it handicap accessible at all. I don't know if you've ever been out there, but you have to go at a certain time of the tide because of the ladder. And, it's kind of hard to get in and out of, and you can't fit a lot of people at once.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I completely understand. And if there can't be that kind of access, it's very understandable. But
right.
I just thought I'd ask. But anyway, Mayor Frank Picozzi, again, I really appreciate your time today, and I wish you all the best with these projects going forward.
Thank you. It's been great.
I am so happy to see Conimicut Light getting a new lease on life, and I know that as former keeper, my friend Fred Mickelson is also really happy about it. A tip of my baseball cap to Mayor Picozzi and the City of Warwick for making it happen. Next, we're going to listen to an abridged version of an interview from 2019 about Sakonnet Light, which is off the town of Little Compton near the mouth of the Sakonnet River, which is actually an inlet and not a true river. It's a typical offshore lighthouse of its period, very similar to several Sparkplug-style towers built in southern New England around the same time, including Conimicut. Construction was difficult in the exposed location, and the light began service in 1884. The hurricanes of 1938 and 1954 damaged the lighthouse, and the last Coast Guard keepers were removed. The lighthouse was sold at auction in 1961, and then in 1985, the owner gave it at no cost to the nonprofit Friends of Sakonnet Lighthouse. The Friends carried out a major restoration from 2010 to 2012. The guest in this interview is Scott Brown, president of the Friends of Sakonnet Lighthouse. I met Scott at a talk I did in Little Compton, and I had a chance to interview him over the phone a little bit later. So let's listen to my conversation with Scott now.
I remember as a teenager in the 1970s, we would shinny up a tiny threadbare rope we found, on a lobster pot to get up the essentially 3-story caisson to the lighthouse, which had no front door on it. There was a foot of guano on every single level. The view, of course, was well worth the eye-watering stench and obviously the tetanus shot, which necessarily followed. But I think it's important to point out to your listeners that this lighthouse sits on a rock, only slightly larger than the space in the open ocean.
Yeah.
So these types of lighthouses are more commonly found, I believe, in bays and in inlets. But this is really a quarter mile south of Sakonnet Point in Rhode Island. And there's nothing south of the lighthouse but Bermuda. So with that backdrop, you got to picture this doorless, windowless structure absorbing hundreds of winter storms over decades, and the level of the metal degradation that this cylinder had suffered. And again, so you have to imagine the exterior looked okay, but the interior was in a really degraded condition, the extent of which was not yet even apparent to us. From the water, it would seem that you're looking at a self-supporting metal structure, but that's really far from the actual engineering. The major load-bearing component of this type of lighthouse is the spectacular brickwork, and this brickwork was literally in perfect condition in 2011, and there was never really any cause to tamper with it in any way, save for the need to visit the steel behind it and assess that condition and then generate a work order to repair it.
So could you tell us a bit more about what it was like to stage a project of that scale on an offshore rock with absolutely no protection from the open ocean and no dock and no electricity on that rock out there?
I think that dovetails nicely into why a project like this can run quickly into the millions. It really is the staging that pushes the financial needle. Never mind all the safety factors involved, it's quite a project. And our contractor, who was absolutely the finest group I've ever worked with, was Nazo Corporation. And I should tip my hard hat to Gary Nazo and his project manager, Russ Klein, because you got to remember, before the first hour of work had commenced, this firm had to address multiple layers of state mandated functions. You have, hazmat remediation plans, OSHA safety plans. You've got to put prevailing wage contracts together for every sub, because remember, this is a DOT partially funded job. They also had to design and fabricate, deliver, and install a 3-story steel platform onto this island to support all their equipment above the waves. And equipment it was. They had a massive electrical generator. They had to store fuel to run it. They had a 3,000-pound per square inch high-pressure pump. They had a hazmat materials processing plant. They had drums to store the hazmat in, porta-johns, safety equipment, tool storage, welding equipment, high-pressure hoses, guns. It was all stacked onto this platform, the size of a small house.
I know it can be a very tough place to land in a boat, and during the restoration process, it must have been very tough for them to land supplies and everything.
Nazo Corporation initially came in with a plan to fabricate a landing track to run their supply boats into, where they would have to almost instantly attach the bow of the workboat to a winch that would pull it up a marine railway, if you will, onto the island, where they would unload crew and supplies. But as I said earlier, this is an open ocean lighthouse, and even on the calmest of days, there is almost always some degree of swell running. So on the first day this expensive system went into operation, the workboat loaded up, they made their approach, they connected with the winch, and then it slowly labors up the rails, and a small swell, as it does every 20 seconds, wrapped around the island and then reconnected with itself exactly where the rails were laid. The result was the anticipated disaster. The boat was popped up and knocked off the rails, spilled all its crew, all the supplies into the ocean. Oof. And that was the first and last day that system was ever used, unfortunately resulting in the project manager's firing.
Wow.
So anyway, a crane was, eventually they fixed a crane to the island to their great expense, which allowed for transferring of supplies to the island, which was still a dangerous proposition, but far more effective.
Wow. Luckily,
the embarrassment was palpable because a little flotilla out there watching, and media and locals, everyone getting that first day of work going.
Well, if embarrassment was the worst of it, that's lucky nobody was seriously injured or killed, at least.
Indeed.
Yeah. Could you maybe give us like a synopsis of what work was actually done during the restoration process?
Sure. The crux of the work was really getting at the steel, the exterior, the inside of the steel that encases the lighthouse. And to do that, we unfortunately had to, remove all the brick that had been laid up all those years ago, which was actually reused. But we did have to take them all down in sections because you have to maintain the integrity of the weight of the structure with the brick. So we would do vertical strips of demolition of masonry, expose the steel. We would get the high-pressure water guns on there, blast the steel, which in some, the ocean side facing steel was so badly degraded you could almost, with a water gun, go right through. So we had to be pretty gentle working with that. So essentially we just went in section and section, blast it as quickly as we could. We would put a sealant on there because the steel was so old and it's not the kind of steel that you have today. This steel would almost flash over instantly and rust. So we had to get a special adhesive on that immediately to keep that rust from immediately starting again.
Right. It's actually cast iron in those days, right?
Right. And so that was pretty much the day-to-day operation was removing brick, blasting, coating, and then as soon as we could, get the masons in there to re-brick it and move on to another section. And this, it's nasty, dirty, dark work. All this work had to be done in a OSHA and hazmat-friendly environment, which meant sealing it in, containing every chip of paint that was taken off. It was very, very labor-intensive and slow. Up we went, and fortunately, the higher we went, we started low, and it was terrible, but the iron was in a lot better condition the higher we went as we got farther away from the ocean.
How does your friends group get the funds necessary for the continued upkeep of the lighthouse?
It's extremely expensive. The staging of work on an offshore island with no facilities for landing boats, no water, electricity, it's really the primary driver of our financial commitments out there. Just to maintain it, you have days and days of mobilization required before any actual work can even begin, even just basic maintenance, never mind the massive project we did. And conversely, the reverse is also true with the demobilization at the completion of any work order we have out there. You know, it's complex, it's dangerous, and it doesn't come cheap. And just like the main renovation, you have days and days of work before any actual work can start on either side of, you know, a paint job or whatever you're doing out there. I will say we've been blessed to have a local contractor out there, which is Kavanaugh Marine Services, who's been our exclusive resource for all the work since our major renovation at the lighthouse. I guess their families lived and worked, you know, in those waters for generations. You know, while the work is dangerous and hard, they see this lighthouse as their personal charge, and they've assumed a real stewardship of that landmark, which is incredibly fortunate for us because there's not a lot of Plan Bs on jobs like that. So, and the same falls true with our community. We have a really steady group of patrons who give to our lighthouse year in and year out to keep this old girl standing up and looking good. And it's, you know, you got to remember, this is literally the symbol of our town and our region and beyond. No one likes to think of our landscape without Sakonnet Lighthouse, and that comes to fore with our patrons and our contractors, and we're very fortunate.
What do you think are some of the highlights of the history of the lighthouse?
I sort of stumbled into this, and I wasn't really a lighthouse guy like I am now. I've certainly read the account of the keepers who rode out without any advance notice, mind you, who rode out the hurricane of 1938. Clearly a testimony to the stoutness of the structure and her keepers as well.
Why is Sakonnet Point Lighthouse worth saving?
Whew. Well, there are myriad reasons to keep this landmark and really all lighthouses up and running for future generations. I would say that really it's the romance of lighthouses, and this one in particular is undeniable. Sakonnet Lighthouse is, I would say, it's as much of an iconic symbol of the Industrial Revolution today as it was when she first graced our coast just clear of the Civil War. You know, in a time when electricity and running water were just concepts. I mean, can you imagine the pride that Rhode Islanders must have experienced pulling up in their horses and buggies and coming to Land's End to marvel at this technological Goliath on the horizon? It's got this magical beam sweeping the shore from dusk till dawn. It must have been mind-boggling. And on a personal level, I can only equate it to the sense of wonder I felt when I was viewing the Apollo rockets in the 1960s. And, you know, here she still remains. She's still an aid to navigation and still a sight to stir the imagination. And I hope that happens for generations to come because you know better than anyone, they're not building a lot of new lighthouses.
Well, that says it beautifully, Scott, and I'm sure it will last for many years, or at least I have high hopes that it will, thanks to people like you and your group, the Friends of Sakonnet Lighthouse, who have done incredible work. Thank you for being with me today, for spending some time with me. I really do appreciate it. Thanks so much, Scott Brown.
Well, thanks, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed reading your books and going to your lectures, and I would highly recommend both. And you're a great guy. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. So that's about it for this episode, which you could call a tale of two spark plugs. Be sure to check out uslhs.org to learn about the tours and preservation grants and everything else the U.S. Lighthouse Society offers. We will be back with a new episode featuring Stratford Point Lighthouse in Connecticut next Sunday. Until then, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thanks so much for listening and keep a good light.
Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.